This one is going to stick, behind Ivanka's silence on the border crisis. On Sunday, Jared Kushner hopped on a commercial flight from Israel back to Washington, where his father-in-law's administration had, once again, set the world on fire. A week earlier, Kushner had gotten out of Dodge, away from the firestorm over migrant children being separated from their parents at the border, as he made a trip through Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Qatar, Jordan, and Israel in his capacity as Middle East peacemaker. His wife, Ivanka Trump, also a senior staffer in the West Wing, had skipped town last Monday, too, raising a bundle for Republican candidates at two fundraisers in Southern California. The couple has a history of skulking out of Washington when Donald Trump makes trouble. There was a ski trip to Aspen when the first Obamacare repeal bill fell apart, and a two-day getaway to Vermont in the days after Trump's comments about Charlottesville. But Ivanka could not escape the mess this time, and she was back in Washington by Tuesday, facing a barrage of criticism over her deafening silence. The first daughter moved her family to Washington and took an official position in the White House, flouting a decades-old anti-nepotism law, because she wanted to serve as an advocate for women and children. In another administration, it might have been an uncontroversial role, indeed, in the early months of Trump's presidency, as Melania Trump remained behind in Manhattan. Ivanka's position was likened to that of de facto First Lady. But Donald Trump hasn't made it easy for his daughter to stick up for families. In his first month in office, Trump enacted a travel ban that separated families at the airport. He pushed legislation that would have raised the cost of maternal and pediatric health care, and he supported Roy Moore, an alleged child molester, for Senate in Alabama. Ivanka only broke publicly with her father on Moore, saying there is a special place in hell for people who harm children, a remark that irked the president, who never withdrew his endorsement. No moment has been as raw, as gut-wrenching, and as universally harrowing as the sight and stories of children as young as 8 months old being ripped away from their parents, some of whom are fleeing to America for asylum, and being placed in cage-like detention centers. Journalists and immigration lawyers who have gained access to these facilities have described scenes of trauma, toddlers wailing, or listless, as they clutch pieces of paper with their parents' names on them, praying to be reunited. Some of these children, experts warn, may be permanently separated from parents who have already been deported. And yet, the advisor to the president on families, the first daughter who came to D.C. to advocate for women and children, was silent, even when Melania issued an innocuous statement calling on the country to follow the laws but govern with heart. As usual, word of Ivanka's internal anguish found its way into the public domain. Last Tuesday evening, President Trump told House Republicans at the Capitol that Ivanka had talked to him about the images of the children. "Daddy," he recounted her saying, "what are we doing about this?" Yet it was not until after her father issued an executive order partially rescinding the separation of immigrant families that Ivanka said a word of her own. "Thank you at POTUS for taking critical action ending family separation at our border," she tweeted. "Congress must now act plus find a lasting solution that is consistent with our shared values, the same values that so many come here seeking as they endeavor to create a better life for their families." The following day, she added, "Now that an EO has been signed ending family separation at the border, it is time to focus on swiftly and safely reuniting the families that have been separated." By week's end, the Christian Broadcasting Network had landed the scoop on the $50,000 donation Ivanka made to a church in Plano, Texas, that had been helping immigrant children at the border, and published the details. People who know the first daughter, who are by now familiar with her cycle of silence and closed-door entreaties to her father, were baffled as to how she botched her messaging in such a major way. She had a free pass on this one in particular, for two reasons, one advisor told me. For one, her dad was obviously going to change the policy anyway, because it was so unsustainable. But more importantly, Melania had already said something, so she was covered. All she had to do was say exactly what Melania said. The template was there, and the direction was so obvious. She could have easily said to her father, "Look, I'm going to just say what Melania said," Or she could have said something without telling her dad, and if he got angry, she could have said, "I was just following Melania's lead," and it would have been fine. For people familiar with the father-daughter dynamic, the president's decision to mention her concerns suggested they had coordinated their messaging. Once she brought it up, he probably said, "Okay, why don't I just handle it?" Or took it upon himself, one person said. Trump was probably trying to protect her, this person added, but ended up undermining her. It also suggests how she has become boxed in by her father, largely powerless to change White House policy, and pilloried when she tries to make her good intentions known. It's now so clearly at the point where she is overly gaming every move out, and that leads to paralysis, this person said. What we saw last week was just total paralysis. She does know what's right, but she's scared to even do that. Part of this fear has to do with the barrage of criticism the first daughter has received over the last year and a half. As one person close to her told me recently, the attitude she has adopted is one of damned if you do, damned if you don't. She knows she'll get criticized if she says nothing, this person explained. And if she does say something, she'll get criticized for not going far enough or saying more. So she is sort of like, what's the point? By Sunday, Ivanka was ready to try to turn the page. She posted a video of herself from April, from a summit in Peru where she helped launch an initiative that provides Latin American women with access to capital and jobs. Poverty, violence, instability and lack of economic opportunity in parts of Latin America are underlying issues leading to the current immigration crisis, and have been for decades, she captioned the video, ignoring the White House policies that have made the border crisis worse. On Monday, she attended an event at the White House on computer science education for students, and on Tuesday, she attended a Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor and Pensions meeting about reauthorizing and modernizing a bill that puts federal money toward closing the skills gap. About these two issues, she tweeted or retweeted 9 times. This is what she knows how to do when things get bad, one advisor told me. She knows she needs to look for a win, no matter how small, to change the narrative. Though several advisors and friends noted that this time, it is going to be harder. This one ain't bouncing off so quickly, one former close associate told me Tuesday night. This one is going to stick. In some